Hello and welcome to your lesson on psychological concepts, which are personality, motivation, and stress. So first off, now we pretty much know what the personality traits of a good leader look like. So positive effect, so that's the belief that everything they're doing is for a good purpose and that what they're going to do in terms of their leading will have a positive outcome on the people. So these are the people who are kind of usually happy, enthusiastic. That's what a positive effect means. Mindfulness, so they're aware of other people's feelings. That usually comes hand in hand with empathy, being able to put themselves in someone else's shoes. They have hope, so they essentially aim. They have good aims, objectives. They're optimistic, and they see the best in everyone and also the task in hand. They're confident, so they have belief in their own ability. They have self-esteem, so their opinion of themselves, they're confident in their ability, and this is where self-efficacy also comes in. That's the belief and confidence that you can actually do a certain task. And then a locus of control. So this means they essentially have control over their actions and they believe they are in control and they can justify their decisions. And finally, which you can see there, these researchers have found emotional stability. So you want a leader who's essentially not over the top emotional, who's emotionally stable, can deal with drama, and still be a decent leader. Let's look at some personality theories. Now, you may know this one from your level 3 psychology, and it's Eysenck's trait theory. And essentially, there's two scales. You've got from left to right, introverted to extroverted. So that's essentially very introspective and reflective, out to very outgoing, outspoken, confident. And then the other one is stable to unstable, or you may have seen stable neurotic. This means stable is someone who's always on an even keel, very carefree, very cool, and then someone who's unstable and neurotic, they kind of get a bit wild, very anxious, can get a little bit crazy, can get very fixated on certain things. And the belief is that this is kind of genetic. You're essentially born with these, and developed by a guy called Eysenck in 52 in the scientific study of personality. Now it's come under some criticism. First off, look at the date it came about, 1952, so it's pretty old to start with. Shields in 76 found that identical twins were significantly more alike on one of the scales than non-identical twins. So this actually essentially backs up the theory. So if it's genetic and you're studying identical twins, then you're going to hopefully see something similar between the two identical twins because they've got the same genes, obviously. However, the Lolin, Woolerman, and Horn in 88 found that only 50% of the variations of scores on the personality dimensions were due to inherited traits. So this means that social factors and environment are also important because 50% is not significant. You need to have something 75% sure or above in order for it to be significant statistically. You can see we've got the references there, so feel free to look those up and put them in your assignments. The next key theory we're going to look at is Bandura's social learning theory. And this is the concept that we learn just through mere observation. And they did this through a study where they exposed small children, they got them to watch a model, which is essentially a role model, an actor, and they saw them in a room with a load of toys, including a doll. And this doll was a big inflatable thing, one of those things where if you punch it, it kind of stands back up. And the doll was called Bobo. And some of the role models kind of act really nicely in the room, and some of the others acted aggressively and violently, off like punching the doll. And then they put the children in the same room with the same toys, and lo and behold, the ones who saw the aggressive role model acted aggressively towards the doll, and the ones who saw the peaceful model essentially acted peacefully and played nicely. Now, what they found was that if the models had the same gender as the child watching, there was a bigger impact. They were more likely to imitate the role model. And also, if it was supported with rewards, then they were also more likely to repeat the behavior, essentially either violent or the peaceful behavior. However, the rewards had to match the individual's needs. If they gave the child essentially sweets that they didn't like, then it wasn't that much of a reward and didn't increase the likelihood of imitation. Now, this is different from previous concepts such as behaviorism, which is essentially where if you reward a behavior, someone does it again, or an animal does it again. And Skinner proved this with rats and dogs. However, Bandura says that as humans, there has to be conscious thought after the observation for it to then lead to learning, and that's what separates us from animals. So quite an interesting concept and quite a lot in terms of role models. And I've seen this personally when coaching. It was essentially a couple of days after the whole kind of the media made a big deal of Didier Drogba diving and coming out and saying he was diving. And a load of 8-year-olds I was coaching immediately began imitating to dive and like clipping their own heels and going down looking for free kicks, often holding their faces. And that's through just watching the TV. So yeah, quite interesting stuff. So here's essentially the critique of it. This means looking at kind of I'm trying to criticize it essentially, trying to look at what's good and what's bad about it. Now, it's an interesting theory, and the fact that it was actually supported by actual study results, and you can actually see videos on YouTube, and we'll probably look at one in the lesson. It has been said that it doesn't account for nature. So someone might be genetically disposed to be either more violent or aggressive or not a team player, just because of essentially how their brain is essentially structured. So someone might be born with probably like a greater hippocampus or a smaller frontal lobe, which affects their inhibitions. So it could be actually nature or genetics or inherited traits that could affect someone's behavior or their learning. And it also could be said doesn't account for all thoughts, feelings, and values, just observational behaviors. So it doesn't actually tell us much about why the children were imitating the behavior or how they were feeling when they did it. They were just doing it. So it could say it only kind of explains behavior and not the reasons behind it. Also, some of us, and myself included, play the odd violent video game or watch the odd violent film, and however, we're not violent people. All right, so therefore, this tells us that we are not actually perhaps learning these behaviors just through watching them. Or you could argue that, well, we were old enough to actually know better, and we've developed a conscience that stops us from acting out or being violent. Or we have cathartic methods to reduce our violent tendencies. As we said before, people said, oh, it's just people responding to reinforcement. They see someone do something and then they do it. For example, like a puppy getting treats to then do something. However, Bandura's main response to that was it requires conscious thought. There has to be reflection after witnessing a behavior before they then imitate it. So this is how people act or behave in a certain way regarding a task and based on their personality. So the personality of a leader could be said to come from them seeing someone else perform effectively in that leadership role. And this reference at the bottom is Skinner, who came up with the behaviorist concept of how people learn, of how animals and people learn through being rewarded. So there's no thought, just rewards. The next psychological concept is motivation. Now, this is essentially the effort and drive exhibited by an individual towards a set goal. Now, that's a definition from Weinberg and Gold, one of the key psychological textbooks that we have recommended in the reading list. And there's two essentially facets to it. The first is intrinsic. So people are motivated to do things from within for a feeling of worth, pride, satisfaction. So any of you are playing sport or doing anything you enjoy in your own time, it's because you're intrinsically motivated. I don't think we have many athletes who are getting paid to play in this class. However, the majority of you are doing and playing because you enjoy it. It's not because you're getting external praise or getting given medals or food or paid. You're doing it because you actually enjoy it. You love it. So intrinsic motivation is said to have been the most effective way to motivate someone, to keep someone going in a set activity, task, or behavior. Now, the other side to this is extrinsic motivation, and this is when it comes from outside of the individual. So it could be tangible, which means you can touch it. So T for tangible, T for touching. This is like medals, giving a toddler a treat for performing a press up, or giving, and then you have intangibles where you can't touch it. So praise. If you gave someone praise, say well done, then that's a intangible extrinsic motivator. Now, the studies have found that essentially intrinsic motivation is more effective than extrinsic motivators. This is quite obvious, really. You do something because it makes you happy. So why do you play FIFA with your mates? Why do you go and have a kickabout? Why do you go and go spar with someone at your boxing club? It's because you enjoy it. You enjoy what you get out of it. Now, we have a study here, Deci et al. Et al. Means there's two other authors, but Deci comes first, so you just say Deci et al., Latin. And he found that in education, which is a lot of where coaching and sport research lies, he found that if you gave unexpected tangible rewards, so if out of nowhere you gave a reward such as like a medal or a sticker, it actually increased the intrinsic motivation. But if after every task a child received a sticker or got given a medal, they found that they actually decreased the intrinsic motivation because there was an expectation that they were going to get paid. Now, you might find this, if any of you have ever had to train a pet before, such as a dog or a puppy, that if you give a treat every single time, then the animal becomes very dependent on the food, and so will only do the set behavior if given the food or the treat. So you have to keep it kind of a little bit random, a little bit unexpected, because then they develop a love for it, and it's an added bonus if they get the treat or not. And you can see the reference at the bottom. So while the idea is intrinsic is usually more effective than extrinsic, you can actually improve intrinsic through giving external rewards as long as there's a little bit of them being unexpected or random. Now, as leaders, how do we apply this? So the most important thing is, and most of you have done some sort of coaching, the immediate motivator that you can do as a coach is extrinsic and intangible, and that's usually through praise. That's the most effective method that you can use to motivate the people within your group as a leader of an activity. So you have to praise the right actions. Now, it's been found, and it's actually more of an anecdote, there's not much specific research, but it's more about observations by coaches, that if you essentially reward specific behaviors with praise, it's more effective than just giving general praise. So, for example, if during a pike in a trampoline lesson, if you say, well done on the pointed toes there, that's excellent pointed toes, then you're more likely to see the participant repeat those pointed toes than if you just said, well done, if they did point their toes. So if you make specific, they link the actual praise to the behavior and are more likely to repeat it. So it's very difficult, especially for young people who begin coaching, especially when coaching their peers, to give out praise. It's very difficult. But if you do it, and you've probably been on the end of receiving praise, how does it make you feel? If someone says your name and gives you praise for something you've done either in a lesson or a coaching session or in life, it's really rewarding, and it really is a good motivator. So praise is one of the most important and easiest ways that you can get your participants motivated and learning and getting better. the World Health Organization, WHO, they define well-being and mental health. So good mental health is related to mental and psychological well-being. So this is people who essentially do not have negative effects from stress. They can maybe get stressed or have to deal with stress. However, they can deal with it effectively and it doesn't affect them. So usually they suffer less from the effects, less negative effects. So as we talked about positive effects before, negative effects are less instances of depression, anxiety, neuroses. So this is people who are often worried about things, and more kind of positive effects are usually more optimistic, more thinking of positive outcomes, enthusiastic, engaged. So those are essentially indicators of good well-being and mental health. One of the next key concepts is the concept of arousal, which is the general physiological and psychological activation of the body. And it's on a continuum from the far end of deep sleep. So this is when you're completely carked out and when your heart rate is at an all-time low, you're breathing like 6 times a minute. And this then goes all up on this continuum to the top of intense excitement, when your heart's racing, you're breathing really rapidly, you're sweating, adrenaline's pumping, and your mind's going 100 miles a second. So arousal is on a continuum, and we're going to look at what that continuum looks like. So here I've included some pictures of my new puppy George, and so the arousal continuum. So low arousal, and we talked about the deep sleep or even a coma. You can see here little George is completely cocked out. He's all tucked out. He shouldn't be allowed on the couch anyway, but he's all tucked out there. So his heart rate's really low, his mind's really calm, and he's at low arousal levels. And then if we go up the scale to the very top end, we've actually had to put him in jail. I'm joking. That's just his crate there. But you can see he's just woken up. He's very excited, and he's kind of in a frenzy. He's bouncing off the cage. He's found himself under the blanket, and he's going wild. So that's essentially our continuum. Now, as a leader, you essentially want to find and put your participants in the correct place for their task. Now, you're going to look at another video regarding theories of arousal. However, I want to think about if the task was really intricate, for example, how to play the board game Operation, you'd want their arousal to be pretty low. So if their heart's racing and they're sweating and adrenaline's high, they're going to be really poor at getting those little parts out of the operation guy. However, if you need your guys to band together and lift a 100-kilo log, then you're going to want their arousal high. Then you want up for it and that adrenaline pumping, ready to lift it. So you kind of have to find the right level, and you have to think about how can you get your participants in the right place on the continuum for effective performance. Now, like we said, the theories of arousal are on a different video which you will watch in your own time. Now, how does arousal actually work? So it uses a thing called the autonomic nervous system. Now, looking at that word autonomic, this means auto means self. So it pretty much does it by itself. It doesn't take any kind of conscious thought. It just kicks in. So if a task is put upon you, so for example, you have to go and squat 100k, your nervous system kind of kicks in. All right, there's a pressure there that then causes your heart rate, causes your body to release adrenaline to the bloodstream, which then increases things such as heart rate, breathing rate, increases sweating, increases blood pressure, increases muscle tension, and all these things increasing your arousal. Okay, but it also then can decrease it as well. It can also decrease it as well and reduce your arousal levels. And you can actually help it along through different activities such as breathing or mental imagery, which we're going to look at a little bit later on. Now that we've looked at arousal, which is neither negative or positive, we can actually see the effects. And so we're going to look at, so over arousal often leads to stress. So we're going to see this as a little bit of a negative thing, but some people can deal with it a lot better. So it's a conditional feeling experienced when a person perceives that the demands on them are actually greater or exceed that the resources they have available to them. So say, for example, someone put 100 pieces of coursework on my desk and say, right, you need to mark these within the hour. That's above my personal ability to actually do it. So my stress levels will increase. And this comes from a very animalistic concept of fight or flight, where it's evolved in us is an evolution process. Most animals have this, where when stress is placed upon them, they either come out and fight it or they flight, which is run away. Now, a lot of the time we can't do either. The 100 pieces of coursework doesn't really give me, I can't choose to fight or flight it. So I have to then just deal with the stress, and it has negative effects. And we're going to look at what some of those effects are. So in terms of leadership, you've got to recognize the sense of stress, not only as yourself as a leader. Are you getting stressed? Is it causing you to perform probably below your average performance? Or are your participants becoming stressed and you're seeing negative effects on them? So have a look at some of these. We've got the physical, also known as somatic. We've got the thoughts, which is also known as cognitive. And then we have behavioral. And also we've included feelings in there as well. So you can feel this as a leader. I start this often when coaching or teaching. Maybe something doesn't work as well as I hoped, or some resources go missing, or I forget to print something out. Then I go through some of these things, and I feel these things through stress. So you've got the physical, thoughts, behavioural, and feelings. So I want you to just have a pause and look at these things and think: have you ever felt these in a stressful situation? And if so, how do you deal with them? And second of all, has one ever caused another? Have you thought that you weren't stressed and suddenly realised that your heart's racing, and then that makes you really worried, or kind of you then begin to feel guilty, or you feel anger or resentment? So think about, is there links between them? Does some cause the others? For example, does some of the physical cause the behavioural? Does your increased blood pressure may lead to poor concentration? There's a very good chance that it does, because you may see blood being rerouted in your brain to different parts. So you make then poor decisions because of this. And this is something that we'll look at also in lesson, the actual physiology of stress and over arousal. And one of our final concepts is anxiety. Now, this is very similar to stress, but let's think of this as just a feeling of worry or fear. Okay, that kind of uneasiness, and it kind of goes a bit above and beyond stress. So people can get stressed and deal with it, and then some people can get anxious and then struggle to deal with it. It's like real feelings of worry or nervousness. Can be caused by your genetics. Some people are more disposed to this. Could be your environment, how you've been brought up. You may have an overactive fight or flight response, and more adrenaline is pumped into your body, even when the situation is not really too threatening. You may be exposed to too much stress, your life circumstances, your actual personality traits. So you may be more disposed because you are neurotic or unstable. If you have low self-esteem, so no confidence in your own abilities, and if you have poor coping skills, so you don't, for example, go for a run or go to the gym, or you don't use breathing methods or good positive mental imagery. And there's two things this can be defined in: trait and state. So people who have trait anxiety are essentially, they're the people who have high trait anxiety. They're anxious all the time. Any little situation makes them anxious. And then state anxiety refers to the anxiety people feel during any certain situation. So, for example, right now, I'm not too stressed talking into my computer, but if suddenly I'm now playing football, and again, it lies on my shoulders to bang in 5 goals, as always, then my state anxiety might become higher. So depending on the situation, it changes. However, people who have higher trait anxiety will have higher state anxiety in virtually every situation, if you can understand that. And this leads to, as we talked about before, somatic and cognitive anxiety. So somatic refers to your body, so heart rate, blood pressure, breathing rate, and sweating, high adrenaline. And cognitive is essentially your thoughts and feelings of worry, or nervousness, or your fear that you're not going to complete your task, or fear of not doing well. So as a leader, you have to be essentially ready for these things. And the best thing you can do is essentially improve your experience, improve your confidence, and this comes from experience, but also improving your coping skills. So if something goes wrong during your session, employ an effective breathing method in order to lower your anxiety, which will then improve your decision making and then improve your leadership. Also, you have to be able to recognize this in people. If you put the same task in front of your group, not everyone's going to have the same feelings or thoughts about it. Some people might cause them high anxiety. If you ask a load of people to climb a wall, someone in it might have a real fear of heights, and suddenly their anxiety's gone high and they won't perform well. So, as a leader, we've talked about methods of reducing anxiety, and the first is breathing techniques. Now, we will try these in lesson as well, but some simple ones are breathing in for 6 seconds and breathing out for 6 seconds, and that's recommended by the chief psychologist in charge of the British Olympic team. So she recommends that for athletes who don't have to suffer with anxiety. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Other methods include breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 7, and breathing out for 8. And this mimics the breathing when sleeping. And this can actually make you quite tired and actually quite good for relaxation and also trying to get to sleep as well. Next is imagery. So this is like essentially using mental imagery to picture yourself maybe in either a relaxing environment or in a scenario where you're being successful in the task that you're leading. So before your session, if you essentially imagine it and imagine the successful outcomes, this will reduce your anxiety regarding the session. The next is positive self-talk. This is essentially use set phrases such as I'm doing this really well, I've got great control over this group, I know exactly how to perform this skill. It will decrease anxiety and improve motivation and confidence. And the final one is cathartic activities. So this is when we talked about when you're stressed and you like go for a run or go to the gym or you go down your boxing gym and smash someone in the face. Cathartic, it means getting out all that kind of negative energy through activity. So those are your techniques that you can use to reduce anxiety, either yourself as a leader, or if you can recognize it in your participants, you can learn how to manage them as well. And that concludes this flipped lesson.